You're watching Breakfast Central on News Central on a Friday. Our first story takes us to South Africa, where environmental organizations in South Africa are calling on the government to put a moratorium on new coal mines, coal-fired power stations and industrial facilities in the Highveld region. The region is one of the most polluted areas in the world, with more than 12 power stations as well as smelter plants.
The call comes as South Africa's Forestry, Fisheries and Environment Minister Barbara Creecy put out calls for comments in regulations to enforce air quality management plans. It's been led by a group of 8 environmental organizations who say the province has the largest concentration of coal mines and government spends billions on hospital bills.
But the mining companies argue that they are providing hundreds of jobs, benefiting many more dependents and the economy. So, joining us this morning to make sense of this situation is environmentalist Moudy Mudzielwana, who also owns the Tshikovha Green and Climate Change Advocates, to talk about the impact of the mining on the environment in the province. Thank you so much for being here, Moudy. Now, you're an environmentalist. Let's go straight into it. Paint us a picture. How bad is the impact on the environment?
Yeah, South Africa power depends mostly on coal-fired plants, and Mpumalanga, in a small town called Creecy, it's considered the second most polluted town in the world. So it means that there is a lot of carbons coming from the coal-fired plants in Mpumalanga. So that is one thing that the environmentalist feels, that if we continue creating new plants for coal, then it means that South Africa will be over-dependent on coal-fired plant and then for creating more pollution to the world.
Well, I mean, so I'm guessing you agree with the 8 environmental organizations who are asking government to stop new coal mines from being developed.
I'm not, I would say yes and no. Firstly, yes, it means that South Africa needs to be quick in terms of approving the green energy in terms of solar. However, if we look at the coal plants or the mine in the country, you will see that a lot of mines are creating a lot of jobs, and then we cannot really just stop creating new mines. Most of the environmentalists in the country, they rely on doing business on such type of plants. That would necessarily means that we are saying, as environmentalists, we are saying environmental affairs is also conceding that it cannot create laws and policies that will prevent pollution. So it is a balance. So we need to really look at that to say there should be a transition where all the plants can be transformed into solar plants. We create solar energy through within those plants. However, if we are considering job creation in our country, we need to more GDP in our country than any other business model. So we really need to be careful about that, just stopping abruptly.
All right, Moudy, do you think the South African government is actually doing enough to address environmental pollution caused by coal?
No, not necessarily so. There is if you were talking about that small town of Witbank, you are talking about over 120 mines. Most of the mines are still struggling to meet certain requirements of the environmental authorizations, and the enforcement of the law is minimal. I believe that should there be more enforcement of the law, they will be able to fight pollution and compliance within the mines. So most of the mines within that town are not necessarily complying. So the Department of Environmental Affairs should enforce compliance within these mines without compromise. That, I believe, it will be enough. And the process of environmental impact assessment, when done, it should be very clear on the consequences of not complying with the environmental approval that are given to all the mines. So in these towns, not necessarily only that town, many towns, there is a need to make sure that the compliance is enforced more than just the way it is now. So I feel the department is not doing enough, and they are capable of doing enough.
What would you say, the benefits of the coal mines, comparing that to the damage to the environment that it's causing? How would you rate both, and would you, maybe have a totally different suggestion for the government to maybe start looking into with regards to energy?
Yeah, one of the things that I believe we are doing as a country, we are getting it wrong as a country. We are comparing green energy and coal energy as an alternative for either. Coal energy obviously it's dependent on the ore underground, so that ore gets depleted, and obviously when it's depleted, that most of the mines are not rehabilitated properly. And if we can rehabilitate those mines and be able to create green energy over that as part of rehabilitation, that would be my suggestion. And if we were to look at the environmental impacts created by the mines, it's more dangerous because it affects the natural environment. It also creates problems for human health. However, most of the African problems in terms of the human health and them is based on the people not being able to afford their lives in terms of job creation. So you are saying the mines are creating jobs and the environmental impact is higher, but it's higher because we are not enforcing compliance. So if we enforce compliance as environmental scientists, we must be comfortable that our recommendations will be able to keep such kind of problems. And if we are talking about green energy also, it still has its own problems because some of the solar panels may not be disposed anyway should they be discarded or maybe when they get older. So environmental problems will always be there, either from solar or either from the mines. However, we need to balance that by enforcing the compliance in either of the projects when they get to be done. So we should never compromise on the environmental compliance and monitoring of all the health and safety issues within these mines. Then I can say that the balance should be that we don't have to create more when we have not enforced the rehabilitation for those that are left polluting the underground water.
Well, Moudy, I would like that you expatiate a little bit more on the health challenges. People would argue that Africa contributes very little to climate change and some of those challenges. But in South Africa, are there hospital cases that you can refer to that are have come from the pollution of the environment by these coal mines? Are there things that you can already see in Mpumalanga, that are directly related to these coal mines and the presence of the coal mines? I'm talking of health issues now.
Yeah, as an environmental activist, I've met several people in a small town called Grail. Those people, they were complaining that they've got their eyes have got issues based on the dust that is coming from the mines. There is incidents of acid water that has leaked into some water around, and some animals drink that water and died. And then also some of the houses in the small town called Ochis and Pola, you would see the houses are cracked because of blasting that happens in the mines. So the close proximity of some of the mines within the communities is where you find there is a lot of problems that are created by these mines. So there are health issues that are linked to environmental pollution, especially the air emissions. And there's a lot of people that have got asthma will tell you that they started having these kind of problems based on the mines that are around. So there are cases that you can link them to the mines. However, you cannot, because there are several mines around, you cannot immediately say this is the mine that caused such kind of a problem.
I want to say thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Moudy. Thank you for shedding more light on this situation then in Mpumalanga.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.